Hello, this is Oliver with Iowans for Freedom, and I have Emily and Kimberly from Freedom Over Fear, Unmask Our Children with us, and Representative Jeff Shipley. We're going to talk about recent events here in Iowa and the impact that these guys have had on it. So, welcome, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver.
Right. It's great to have you. So, I
Great.
heard you a little bit on an interview with General Flynn the other day. Could you tell us about that? That he wants to honor you with an award, and I heard the word Iowan mama bears or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
that.
so
We have a term now, don't
Yep.
we? We're coined the Iowa Mama Bears.
All right.
Yep.
Fitting.
Yes.
So how did that come about?
So when we were in Tulsa, when we told the stories of Evie and Olivia, they knew that what the schools had done to our children were abusive. I mean, the policies that they made and the acts that they did were abusive. And so they could see that we're two mama bears, trying to protect our children. And we did everything we could in order to protect them against the abusive policies and the harm that was done to our children. So we're the mama bears now.
We are.
You are the mama bears.
That's what Meehan called us from the very beginning. He's like,
Dr.
you don't mess with two mama bears protecting their cubs because
Exactly.
some claws out,
Exactly.
and we did.
Well, tell us about the journey and what happened in the beginning and what led you to, showing up was it every Monday or every
other
two.
Monday.
every other Monday you showed up at outside the school, the administration building? or the
Starting
school
March
board?
23rd was our first one.
How many times did you show up and protest?
5.
5 times. How many times did you speak at the school board, counting the time that they kicked you out?
We tried 5.
Yeah, we tried all 5.
I
think
only
I got
the
3.
Yes.
I got 3 out of the 5 because the very first one I wasn't on the agenda. And then the second to last one, they said I couldn't go in because I had the time before I took my mask off and they all walked out on me.
Right. And then
Oh,
I was
wow.
refused the last time because I ruined the decorum of the meeting when I removed my mask being 10 feet away from the closest person.
Wow.
I
So
did.
start with the story of when it began, why you were protecting your kids, what was going on, and kind of if you could lead us through the progression over the last few months, that would be great.
So yeah, it started with Olivia back in October when she first started getting her face rash. She started with a minor rash around her face where her mask was sitting. Shortly after that, the governor had made the mandate that we had to go to 2-ply instead of like the gator mask or whatever. So she went to the 2-ply. Things seemed to be okay. She was just had a little bit of a rash. We started putting triple antibiotic ointment on it, and the doctor's like, well, just keep an eye on it. I was like, okay. Well, as the days went on, her rash got worse. And so we had to take her back into the doctor. And she's like, okay. She's like, it's starting to look a little red, even more red than it was. She's like, let's try this medicine. I'm like, okay. Well, that didn't work either because she was having issues keeping the mask off long enough to let her face heal. So that went on for probably 2.5 months. We went to the doctor numerous times. The staff or the infection kept getting worse to the point it got impetigo. And so just because of the bacteria sitting there, we changed her mask 2 to 3 times per day. And we changed the different types of masks that she was wearing. I mean, we tried the cloth ones, we tried the disposable ones, and none of it wouldn't work. And so then we went to the doctor, and on December 7th, the doctor wrote up a medical exemption for Olivia. So I took that medical exemption to her school. I said, hey, she cannot wear a mask, but they are saying she can wear a shield. So we hope, with our hopes with the shield was that she wasn't going to be too isolated from everybody else. Well, unfortunately, that was not the case. Unfortunately, Olivia did get isolated. They put her on one side of the room, they put everybody else on the other, and they said that the shield was not a proper mitigation for protecting others from COVID. So we did that for about a month.
Wow.
Within the month, the school called us back and said, hey, we're really having issues with Olivia falling behind in school. She can't participate in small group. Can you go back to the doctor and kind of get this revised to maybe she can wear a mask maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time per day so we can put her in small group again. I was kind of hesitant at first, but her face was looking pretty good at that time. We got it pretty much cleared up with 3 topical antibiotic ointments and 2 oral that she had to take. So we did get it cleared up for the most part. So the doctor's like, okay, let's try this. We can try the 15 to 20 minutes a couple times a day. Within 2 weeks of doing that, her rash came back. And
Wow.
the doctor said, Kim, if we don't get this off and keep it off, we can't. It's just going to get worse, and she's going to get a more serious infection that can get into her lungs. She's like, if she gets staph again and it gets into her lungs, that can cause a whole kinds of different kind of issues than what she already has. And so I started going towards the board. I said, hey, we need to get these off our kids. Olivia is being segregated. She can't learn very well. She's falling behind in school. Now she's coming home not wanting to be near anybody. We had to put her in counseling because she just came home daily crying and upset. She didn't want to go to school. It's emotionally and physically harming her. And
Wow.
so we try to say to the board, please help us do something, work with us. And they tried, I think, kinda, by saying, okay, let's try this for a little bit, like with the 15-20 minutes mask, or let's try to put her in with somebody, another teacher by themselves to get her a little bit more help, but none of that was really working. And so, like I said, Emily and I went to the board several times, spoke to them, and unfortunately nothing was ever done.
Wow. Okay. And then how did that lead to? I think I went to your first protest with you guys at the Polk County Health
You sure
Department.
You sure
did.
did, Oliver.
Yeah,
How did that grow from there to being on the national stage,
well, the school told us when we went that they were following Polk County guidelines. So that's why we protested in front of Polk County, because we wanted to show them that, hey, these are harming our children. Please make it an option. And that's where we started, because we heard through our school that that's what they were going by. Lo and behold, that was not the truth. They ended up, once Polk County said, okay, we're lifting the mask mandates, whatever, and then schools dug their heels down and backed up, and they didn't do it. So then I'll let Emily kind of fill you in on how we got to Tulsa.
All
Sure.
right.
Sure. So when I saw what was going on with Kimberly and she was able to do the medical exemption, I tried the same thing, because Evie, having a sensory processing issue, she was not able to learn. She was not able to focus. She was crying every day, just pleading with me, don't make me go back to school and don't make me put on this mask because I can't do it, Mom. And just seeing Kimberly and knowing that she did something, I needed to do something too. And I thought, okay, I can do something. So I pursued the superintendent with the American with Disabilities Act route, showing their guidelines to them, stating, look here, it says if a child has a learning disability, then if the mask is affecting that, then they shouldn't have to wear it. So he said, no, I want a medical diagnosis. That isn't good enough for me. No. So I'm like, okay, what else can I do? So I went the religious route because I knew it was harming her. And under my Christianity, I can't do something that keeps harming my child when I know that it's harming her. So I turned in the medical exemption on March 31st. However, we'd already protested and they already knew where we stood. And so what they did is they placed, unlike Olivia, they did not place a plexiglass over her desk right away, but they did with Evie. And they made her keep 6 feet distance of everyone in school, including her associate. So like a prisoner, you know how that you go up and you put your hand on the glass, the prisoner is on one side, the other person's on the other, the visitor. That was my daughter every single day.
That's terrible. And let me ask you this. Do you think that was kind of a retaliation for you guys being so vocal?
Yes, I do.
Absolutely.
Fighting
Yes.
back?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
terrible.
the first day that we went up against the board, the very next day, Olivia didn't want to wear her face shield or her mask at school. And before, when that had happened, the principal has always called me and said, hey, we're having a bad day. Can you talk to Olivia or can you pick her up? And either I'd pick her up or we just talked to her and she'd put her shield back on and everything was fine. Well, that day they took her out of class, put her in the principal's office. Her shield was in her backpack. Olivia said that her principal took it out and put it up on a high shelf that she couldn't reach and made her sit in the office. They made her sit in the office.
Wow.
And then they also made her eat lunch in there. All the while they're doing that, they were putting plexiglass and moving Olivia's desk in her classroom. So then after lunch, they took her back into the classroom and they're like, okay, you're going to sit here and you can't move and nobody can come near you.
That
And
is
that's what they did.
terrible.
The very next day after I had went to the board, and I went to the teacher and I'm like, what is going on? I asked the principal, why are you putting her behind plexiglass? We said no from the very beginning. We were months into this at this point. This was at the end of March. And all of a sudden they did that. And she's like, well, we thought Olivia was standing up and protesting and not going to wear her mask because of what you just did the day before. I'm like, she's 6 years old. There is no way that my daughter knows how to protest and say that
Oh
she's
my
not wearing a
gosh.
mask.
Oh
I'm
my
like, her
gosh.
shield was in her back. And she's like, oh, she didn't want it. I'm like, they didn't even send her shield home that day. And so when I called the principal, I'm like, where is her shield? Why doesn't she even have it? Because she came home with it daily. And she's like, well, we didn't know where it was. I'm like, I put it in her backpack. She said that the principal, Miss Ryan, took it out and put it up on the high shelf. And so Olivia wasn't allowed to have it. And they did it basically because me and Emily went against them.
So they punished your kids for you kind
Mhm.
of speaking up for them and saying,
That's
hey,
exactly
this
what
isn't
they
right.
did.
We need to make this change.
Yeah.
So then how'd that lead to your trip to Tulsa and
Yeah.
getting up on the big stage?
So once we knew that they weren't listening to us and they were harming Evie and Olivia and others too, we just needed to do something. So that's when the Tulsa Health and Freedom Conference came open. 2 tickets just happened to become available after 2 canceled. 2 weeks later, we got a call.
Interesting how that happens by magic, right?
Oh yeah, no coincidence. God's hand was over
Right.
all of it, no doubt. And when we were there, the first person I spoke with at the booth was Dr. Meehan's wife. So what we did is we told her our stories. She's like, you got to meet my husband. We're like, great, who's that? Dr. Meehan. And funny thing is, on our website, Freedom Over Fear, I put his quote up about the children being in hell by the way that they were treated. And
Right.
Dr. Meehan was the one who wrote it. So he said, okay, these girls have a story to tell. Come up on stage. When he was up there, we're like, yeah, I guess
Oh,
we
yeah.
do. Let's get up here.
That's
So we
awesome.
went up there and we told our stories, and the support was just overwhelming. Overwhelming. And you wouldn't believe how many hundreds of moms came out and said, my child's hurt too. My child's hurt too. So we want to do something too. So that's how we got to Tulsa. And then from then on, we just got support. Like Clay supported us. We were on Steel Truth with Ann Vandersteel. We were interviewed by Epic Times, NTD News. I mean, it's just all over the place. It just blew up. I mean, God just did incredible things with it all. And now they're paying our way to continue to travel across the country,
And help others.
and help others. So
That's
what we're gonna
awesome.
do.
That's awesome. Now we've got Representative Shipley joining us today, and I know you had a question for him. I want to be cognizant of his time.
Yeah,
I
thank
know
you.
he's got a big night planned. So I want you guys to ask him that question, and then I want to let him get back to his day and planning
Okay.
for tonight. But then I want to continue our conversation. So
Sure.
what question did you have for Representative Shipley?
Sure. Jeff, first, we just want to say thank you. To us, you're a
Yes.
hero. I mean, even if you refuse that title, to us, you are. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you. We want to say that first. The question I want to ask is this. After hundreds to thousands of people that we've talked to, they want to know in these more blue states what they can do to make this happen in their state. And as a representative, I want to know your perspective.
Yeah, well, that's such an excellent question, and one that is on just our minds all the time, is how can we be powerful human beings and assert ourselves in this world against injustice, or what some people might be considered evil, which I think the traumatization of children is evil. Just first and foremost is thanks again, Oliver, for putting this conversation together, and thank you, Kim and Emily. I mean, as far as heroes are concerned, I guess takes one to know one, so your compliment is very much appreciated. And I'm happy that I was able to learn of Olivia's story, I think back in early January, and was able to try to articulate it as best I can on the House floor. And thankfully, we were able to get this small but very significant victory here in Iowa. I think you really just showed the model. And going back to, I'll say this too, that I believe that the mother's instinct to protect her child is one of the most powerful forces in human nature. And we need to channel that. And everyone needs to, again, like this, if you see something, say something. And we need to not settle. I think there are a lot of people who, their kids are complaining and they are just shrugging it off as if it's not a big deal. We really need to sit, listen, and observe to see how these policies are impacting people. because certainly the differently abled or medically disabled or just people who have different needs, religious minorities, they are being harmed physically and physiologically in with a face infection or psychologically in a lot of ways. And it's very important that these stories are told. So I guess my question back to you guys would be, was there a moment in time, I mean, did you guys have fear or trepidation? I mean, obviously it must have been very intimidating. I mean, never whatsoever. Okay, because I think that's the thing that I get. I mean, I hear this too, where someone will tell a very powerful story and I'll say, can you tell that publicly? Are you willing to speak up and share that at a school board meeting or at a forum or online or something? And there's this kind of fear of public speaking. And a lot of it is that social pressure, as you admitted, that, yeah, there could be avenues for retribution. They could take things out on an innocent child for what the parent, for the parent speaking.
That's always a parent's fear, I think, is that something like that'll happen.
Well, so there are a lot of justified fears. There are a lot of fears that are difficult for people to navigate. I mean, obviously, if you're in a state that allows it, I think homeschool or alternative education settings are something that needs to be explored desperately. I think there are a lot of homeschoolers that, because they're able to provide that for their child, they kind of neglect the public school. I think we all need to work together to build more educational opportunities. I mean, the blue states are going to be tough. But I think the biggest thing is just human willpower, the courage to speak the truth. But I mean, before you know what the truth is, we really need to take a deep breath, go within ourselves and really calmly, dispassionately dissect what's happening. Because I think a lot of people get a lot of excited energy when an injustice is occurring, and then they kind of get a little bit ahead of themselves. And then I think that does hurt them in the long run. So, I'll cite letters of a Birmingham jail. Martin Luther King, when correcting an injustice, the very first step is always document the facts. If your kid is coming home complaining from, whether it's a minor irritation or something more significant like a psychological impairment or an actual infection, start keeping a record of that. Keep very
Kimberly,
detailed.
you've been documenting that like crazy since the
I
get-go,
sure have.
right?
Yes, she has.
I have documented everything.
I think that's the reason your lawsuit's going to be so solid, is
And-
because.
And that's exactly right. And just say, I think a lot of people, again, they get a little bit ahead of themselves and they miss over the details. And all these details are incredibly important when building like a legal case. So first, if you're witnessing an injustice occurring in your local school district or community, start keeping records, start documenting, even if it's just a conversation or a comment. Something that could be kind of minor could turn into a bigger deal later if it proves like a pattern of something occurring. That could be a snide, dismissive comment from a school board member or an administrator, or maybe something your child says expressing discomfort or hesitation to go to school. I guess legally speaking, from like your perspective in your case, there's two kind of questions that stick out. One is does the school board have a rational basis to institute the policy? Unfortunately, with the health emergency, arguably they do. Now, the facts and circumstances are changing and CDC guidance is evolving, especially as vaccines are available. So, challenging the rational basis of the school board's policy, that would be the first legal question. Second, assuming that the school board has a rational basis to institute a policy, which they likely do if they're supported by any sort of government recommendation, then it would be, how does this policy accommodate? What reasonable accommodations are provided for individuals that have a religious objection or a bona fide medical disability, verified by a medical professional? And this is the thing. So arguably, Ankeny School District had a rational basis for the policy, but they completely failed in the reasonable accommodation for differently abled individuals. And so that's a huge thing. And that's what we need to document, is that's the documentation, is showing all of the ways that they failed to provide a reasonable accommodation. And then further, like dismissing your comments at school board meetings, that shows that they weren't operating in good faith. I think that would be, again, further evidence of that. So that's kind of how you build your cases, because we need to assert our legal rights, certainly in our elected assemblies, as you guys were able to do with the successful passage of amended House File 847, and then also in the courts of law, where we're going to get all the relevant facts and details on the table and argue the facts of the case and the relevant laws that apply. That's what we need to do. We need human beings that can assert themselves as powerful, sovereign individuals with as utmost dignity, and just asserting that this is not going to be easy. A lot of people are going to have to overcome fears. They are going to have to speak out. Blessed are those who are persecuted for my sake. So when I see people who are saying and slandering you guys, and it's been awfully nasty, but of course the nastiness was only a response
We'll
to
talk on
you
that later.
changing state law. So again, it's like these people wouldn't be nasty if you weren't so powerful and driving the laws of the state of Iowa. So to me, when I see that, it's like, okay, they're being nasty because these women were incredibly effective. They were incredibly effective because they had very powerful stories that deserve to be heard by a national audience, clearly. And then they were able to document, support themselves. And so all those things kind of go together. And yeah, not everyone is as fearless as you women are. But I think that's why you are such a powerful example, because anyone watching can accomplish what you did. It's just going to, again, have the courage to tell the truth and then be persistent. You guys could have given up after your first protest. You guys could have given up after your second protest. You could have given up after they, refused to talk to you at the school board meeting, but you didn't. You were persistent. You showed up. I'm guessing you probably said your prayers at morning, at night. So you showed up with some love or some Christ truth in your heart, in your state of being. And you showed up and you showed up and you showed up and you won. And now you're going to keep showing up because there's a lot more winning that needs to happen. There's a lot more truth that needs to be expressed. And quite frankly, there's a lot more innocent children that need to be protected from these policies. So I hope that gives you some sort of answer or perspective on your question, at least as I see it.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Jeff. We
It
really
does help.
appreciate that.
It does help.
Jeff, tell us what you have going on tonight.
So tonight is a legislative forum on House File 847, these state-imposed rules on masks. And again, it's just so interesting to me, just the duality of the universe. That obviously we were celebrating that night. This was a giant victory. This was rejoicing. When this bill passed, I mean, we rejoiced knowing that Olivia could exist as a healthy human being at school, the school that your tax dollars pay for. So that was a big celebration on our end. But there are other people who see things differently. And I think this is why it is child abuse, because we're instead of viewing children as children, we're viewing them as vectors of disease, which is degrading and dehumanizing. And it is something that happened, to the Jews in Germany in the 1930s. Is, oh, they're spreading illness, they're spreading disease, so we need to, lock them behind plexiglass, whatever. That's terrible, terrible, terrible human thinking. That's destructive to human unity. It's destructive. Those thoughts are destructive to human health. So tonight, anyway, I guess what I realized in the passage of the bill, that while we were rejoicing, other people weren't so happy. And, even though I think their fears might be a little bit misplaced, they're still feeling that fear. They're still feeling that emotion. And because they're human beings that I still exist to serve, I need to find a way to bring them back into the fold. At the very least, talk about it. Why were you so frustrated that this bill was passed? Why do you think kids need to be masked in school? Why are you afraid? And that was what I was trying to do, is bring as many people to the table as possible to have an actual legislative forum where all members of the public, certainly the relevant stakeholders, can speak and speak their piece in a most respectful civil discourse where, no matter what they have to say, we're going to politely respect their opinion.
That's
to
so
the
important
possible.
right now with so much division. That's so important. I really celebrate that you're doing that.
It's,
You're
I
trying
think
to understand.
2 Timothy, chapter 2, verse 24. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Oliver, but yeah, the forum is tonight. It's at 6:30 p.m. We'll be on Facebook Live. We'll be on Zoom. I hear that Kimberly and Emily will be joining us. Oliver, if you want to tap in and say something about the athletic issue and masks, that was another big thing where
Right.
when you have the WHO and the CDC guidance in conflict, yet big tech companies censoring people if you speak. And it was just so weird how being governed, and I said this last year, that I'm not going to be governed by unsubstantiated health theories. Unfortunately, we moved in that direction. And when we're basing our government on unsubstantiated health theories, and not just our elected government, our corporate government, it makes these very, very strange outcomes that I think are a threat to human dignity and human wellness. So anyway, we got a lot on the table. Check out our forum tonight, facebook.com/peaceloveiowa/live. Check that recording. We'll see if we get censored or not.
Awesome.
Hopefully it gets pretty wild, and should be a good time.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks so much. And we'll
Hey,
let you
thank
get,
Thank you.
Talk to you again
Have-
real soon. God love you. Love you guys all.
have a
Love you.
great one.
Bye-bye.
Awesome. So I hope he answered your question in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
We're gonna put out a video, which we did, but
Kind of,
unfortunately
but-
it got cut off. Did you know that? It
Yeah,
got cut short.
Yeah.
So we
Okay.
put out the
Put it right.
blueprint. But we'll do it again. And so we're just gonna do like a bullet point, small little presentation video of basically 4 or 5 points, and then put that out for everyone. Because, too, we can adjust our steps based on where the Lord's leading us. So
Right.
what we did is we just put one foot in front of the other. That's really what we did.
Yeah.
And then when something didn't work, it's like,
We
okay,
tried
nope,
something
over
else.
here. We try something else. We try something else. And so I know they have a lot of states with tyrants for governors. I understand
Oh, yeah.
It might be a lot more
Yeah.
difficult to
a
get
lot
it
more
passed
difficult.
and-
Yeah.
But
you can
nothing
do
is
it.
impossible
Like,
with God. And I mean, if they just
Nothing's
keep putting one
impossible.
foot in front of the
That's
other,
right.
And I want to
that's
ask
all-
you
yeah,
something
that's-
about that. We were at a meeting together the other day at our friend Sonia's, and Emily, you talked about prayer, and Kimberly, you talked about manifesting. And that's something that, a lot of people know about and read about, but you do it in a pretty unique way. And Emily said that you write things down as if they have occurred and they occurred. How did that happen with the getting on the stage at Tulsa, Oklahoma? I thought that was great.
Honestly, I have my book right here that I
Right.
manifest in all the time. And it's just funny. And I'll just kind of read you like one thing that I wrote about Tulsa before it even happened.
Okay.
Let me see if I can find one that will kind of give you, let's see here. It says like number 3, this
Look at the
happened.
date,
This one happened.
April, before it even happened.
Okay.
I wrote,
Okay.
thank you, Lord, for allowing Emily and I to attend the Health and Freedom Conference and being able to tell our stories for the world to hear.
Wow. And I want to clarify that with people.
Oh, wait until
Kimberly
the
wrote this before it happened, as if it
Yes.
had already happened.
April 7th. We didn't even have the tickets on April
Nope.
7th.
and then I said, thank you, Lord, for giving me the opportunity to speak to some of the biggest world's influencers like Lynn Wood, General Flynn, and Andrew Wakefield.
That's
I wrote them
amazing.
down who I want to meet and everybody. So this is
So when is the Mama Bear manifestation journal coming out?
That'd be awesome.
Right?
I mean, I guess
I'll
I just
buy
write. here's my book.
Maybe
There
some.
it is.
And it literally just says seriously on it.
That's awesome.
I mean,
That's so amazing.
that's just the way I'm new to Christ, as Emily has brought me to
Right,
it. Because like I
right.
said, I grew up Christian Science, so it's totally different from like, I guess
Well,
what most people are.
Christ said, with the faith of a mustard seed, you could ask that mountain to move and it would move. And you
That's
guys
right.
seem to have a lot of faith. That's
Yeah.
for sure. You've moved a mountain. So what would you say to people that have the name of your group is Freedom Over Fear. What would you say to people how to get through the fear? And I know you said you didn't really have fear in your quest, but a lot of people do. How do you get through
Yeah.
that and do what's right for your
That's a
kids
great
and stand
question.
up?
I guess I turn to the word of the Lord, and he says, do not fear. He says, God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. And he says, do not fear, be courageous, for I, the Lord your God, am with you wherever you go. And so when I saw what was happening, I didn't only see it
That's
as
beautiful.
wrong, I saw it as evil. And so
Right.
when you rise up against the Lord and against his children, which it's all of God's children are being harmed by this. I thought of David and Goliath. David said, you have come to defy the armies of the living God. Like, I am great because of who is with me, not because of little old David, but because of the one true God that was with him in the battle, that would win this battle for him. So when we entered, no, there isn't fear there, because I just can't sit back and let this evil occur. Like Dietrich Bonhoeffer in World War II, he said, silence in the face of evil is evil itself. And so I just couldn't be silent. And I found one of the most amazing friends who's got a voice even louder than mine to join me. And the two of us, I just knew God was going to do something incredible. He told my heart that, like, you know, to love on Kim, and I found you a great friend, and together I can do great things through you. It's to his glory. He's the one fighting this
And
battle.
we
Amen.
literally equal each other out. Like
Tell me,
her,
tell me about your
weaknesses are my
friendship.
strengths, and my strengths are her. Like, you know, it just goes hand in hand. You know, like Emily's, like she said, she's not as bold as getting up in front of people and just going and doing something. Like she would have never gone to Tulsa by herself. She's like, nope, no, I would never do that. Where I'm just like, heck yeah, let me go. I'll be by myself. I'll be good. You know, but it's always great to have somebody by your side, because then, you know, you're never alone and you have somebody. So even if you find just one person, like I did, I found Emily, and we grew our group to thousands now. Like our last Facebook group before it got taken down had over 11,000 people
Right.
that joined us.
It was
Yep.
amazing.
And we're slowly building up this next one, but it's a little slower than it was
And that's
before.
okay.
But you know,
How so you two weren't friends before all this happened?
no.
We
Okay.
started becoming friends in about September. And when I saw what was happening to Olivia, I was just like, we have got to do something. We're going to do
Right.
something about this, Kim. We're going to fix this. And so we just joined forces, and yeah.
And it was funny because how we actually met was she Facebooked me because I was getting attacked on Facebook on Ankeny Moms for spreading truth about vaccines. So I'm a huge advocate with the vaccines just because my own kids have had issues with it. So
Right.
she reached out to me and said, Kim, you know, you were just shamed. You were just put in jail, like kicked out of the group. But I wanted you to know that you're amazing and what you're doing is great. And she reached out to me and she begged me for weeks. Can we go get coffee? Can we go for a walk? And I'm not a coffee drinker. So I'm like, yeah, we could go
I
sometime.
don't
And then
think
I was
you
like,
and
gonna go
I
on a
don't
walk
think you
with
and
her.
caffeine would mix very well.
Yeah. And so then she's like, can we just go on a walk? And then I'm like, yeah, let's go for a walk. My husband's like, Kim, you're going on a walk with a stranger and during this pandemic, who knows what she's gonna do? So like you could be walking down the street and somebody can take you. So then I'm like, girl, something came up, you know. I told her I did. I blew her up again. I felt horrible. I'm like, why don't we can meet at a restaurant and have supper together? And so then after like 3 or 4 times of rearranging because of my end, we finally met at Sports Page here in Ankeny, and we literally just hit it off.
For 3 hours we talked, and I was like,
and my
Wow.
husband's calling me, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, I ignored it. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And he's like, if you don't answer my text message, I'm coming down there to see what you're doing. And I'm like, I'm fine. We're just in the middle of everything, you know? And we said that night that God put us together for a reason, and we're going to be a force to be reckoned with.
we did.
Yes.
And I knew that God had laid her on my heart, like completely every single day. You wouldn't believe the specific prayers that I prayed for her that were answered. Like, for example, I prayed, God, show her that you're so real, and show her your overwhelming love for her and your care. And he answered specifically. You wouldn't believe it. Like, woke her up in the middle of the night, basically like shook her awake. And anyways, you wouldn't believe it if we told you. But
and then I wrote a Facebook comment about how, you know, my whole family and anybody's watching this that knows me knows, like, Kim, you're full of crap. You are not going back to Jesus, or you're not going to Jesus. They're like, no, this is not Kim. Because even I'm in disbelief some days. They're like, holy cow, like this is really happening. Like my faith in God is growing beyond anything I can ever explain. I just, like I said, my family and anybody watching me, I swear, is like turning over right now. And my grandma would be turning over in her grave, be like, what's going on, Kim? Because this is not you. Because my grandma has preached it since I was little. And I mean, sorry if this offends anybody, but I used to call her the Bible beater. I'm like, Grandma, quit beating me with that Bible. I'm not listening. I don't want to hear it. Nothing. You know, I don't want to shove down my throat. Well,
Right.
I think Emily does it in such a way that, like, she doesn't really shove it down my throat. She listens to me. And I always felt, I guess, when I was growing up, that I'd never like really understood a lot of what God was about, because anytime I like ask questions, they're like, well, why don't you know? Like what was the what do you call it? Repenting.
oh, what's
So
repentance?
like I had no idea what repenting is. Like I don't
Right.
know. And so like I asked, she always said it. She's like, you gotta repent to God. You gotta repent to God. I'm like, what the heck does that even mean? You know,
Right,
so I'm
right.
when it comes to all this, I'm quote unquote dumb. like I didn't know. And so she explains it to me. She dumbs it down for me to where I can understand it. And I
It
think that's
should be
why
simple.
it helps me just understand more. And it's just like, holy mow. And then of course, God's showing me himself that he's here,
Right.
putting us together, taking us to Tulsa. You know, Olivia's suffering was not in vain.
No.
It was because she needed to go through that to
How
get
does
where we are
how does
today.
Olivia feel about all this when you talk to her and show her what kind of a difference her story has been making?
She is just excited. Like she went to school for the first time on Monday. She was very nervous at first. She's like, Mom, what if they put me back in the mask? What if they make me sit out for recess? I'm like, honey, they can't do that. We made a law. And she calls it the rule. She's like, so she's like,
Rule.
we can do it. I'm like, yes, you can. And so she said her first day of school, I have it all videoed when she got home on how excited and just raw it was, because I document everything. And if anybody knows me, they know I document everything. So when she got home, I recorded what she said. And she's like, Mom, it was so great. I didn't have to sit by myself. I got to sit with my friends. And she's like, and I tell everybody who had a mask on, you don't have to do that. I made a rule and you don't have to do that.
That
So
is
she called it
awesome.
Olivia's rule. She's like, I made the rule. You don't have to do this. So you can take it off. And she's like, Mom, there was 2 kids in my school today that had masks on. And after lunch, they took them off and didn't put them back on. So she is very proud of herself. And
She should
I-
be.
and I make
Yeah.
sure that we all know that, you know, Olivia, you helped do this.
You know, and that's so awesome that she's found such a great meaning for her suffering, that it was
Yeah.
such a powerful and important thing, and that now it's going to be a stepping stone for her instead of a hindrance someday.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it's going to help her heal too, and
Yeah.
just kind of overcome it. Like, you know what? My suffering, like Emily always says, was not in vain for her. And
Right.
she'll be a much stronger person because
For
of all.
sure. Yeah, and it's kind of human nature, suffering is, and to find an empowering meaning in it is one of the most important things we can do. So Emily's persistent and you are vocal.
Yes,
That's
that's pretty much right. And together
awesome.
we were just it was just a force to be reckoned with, basically.
For sure. What would you say to all the other Iowans out there, the moms and dads that, you know, emailed their school boards and called them and called the governor constantly? And, you know, we saw little pockets of protests and everything. And what would you say to all those people that kind of helped make that possible?
I want to say first, I mean, God placed us in your path, Oliver, no doubt. And you and Sonia and Jeff and Leslie and all of these smaller groups that came together. Now we had that capital event. It was just
Yeah.
like an event orchestrated by God himself. It truly was. I could just feel the spirit of the Lord there, lifting people's hearts, giving them hope. Even when the law wasn't even, put before the governor then, that we just had hope in our hearts that,
Yeah.
together with unity and love, I just felt tons of love in the room. For
Me
our
too.
children, we were making a difference. And that's what I cared about. And I say to them, every single Iowan, one, we love y'all because,
couldn't have
we
done
got
it
to stick
without
together.
each and every one
Yeah,
of you.
together we did it. That's what I would
Yes.
say.
It
Together
wasn't
we
just
did it.
us. Nope, it wasn't just us. Each and every person that emailed, walked into your school board, text message, called, anybody who did any of that.
Mhm.
We couldn't have done it.
Those
Yes.
Harlan kids
The
were
kids that walked out,
heroes.
those were
Yeah.
here. Yes, exactly. Like, everybody had a point, had a part in what we did. It wasn't just her and I. Everybody did, and we couldn't have done it without each and every one of you. And we thank you.
And I think
Yeah.
the Iowans that did that, we need to spread this to the other states.
We
Reach
do.
out to people across the aisle, across the states. Let's do a tsunami of freedom, a wake of God that just sweeps across this country. That's what I'm praying for next.
Yes.
To manifest that
There you go.
complete wave of the Spirit across this country.
You know what? I'll manifest it right now.
That's
I'll just say,
right.
you know what? Each and every person out there is gonna rise up. This is not the end just because we got the law passed.
No.
This is just the beginning. And each state will follow suit, and each state will get this law passed. I guarantee you that we will get this passed in each and every state.
Well,
So
if you say it, I believe it, especially if you wrote it in that little book of yours. That's like the magic book. People are going to be coming after it.
I'll hide it.
I think you could probably write it anywhere.
Yeah, I sure
I do want to touch on something, and I don't want to bring any negativity to this because it's incredibly positive. But anytime anyone steps up and creates positive change, there are those that attack them. And I want to read something to you. This, I don't know if it's OPE pack,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it's a photo of you and smiling faces and Governor Reynolds and pictures of your daughters, and it's a tweet, and it says, "Here's at Kim Reynolds, Iowa, literally embracing QAnon extremism." What the heck is that about?
We honestly are not affiliated with any letter of the alphabet or any other
Maybe I shouldn't have
organization.
said that out loud.
No, it's
Whatever.
fine.
Yeah.
It's totally fine. But we're not associated with Q. They're
Right.
associating us with him because we took a picture with Lynn Wood.
Yep.
And
it.
that's the
Oh,
only
he
reason
was at
they
that
have
event.
Yep, because we met
Yep.
him at the event. You know, we
Mhm.
met many patriots at that event, and not
Right.
just Lynn Wood, but you know, General Flynn, and we met
And the American Frontline Doctors.
American Frontline Doctors.
Right,
I mean,
right.
millions of people. And you know, what I say to them is we're gonna kill them with kindness because we don't play the same game that they do. We're not on the
Right.
same playing field because we're not doing this to come out and harm anyone. We're doing it to protect what was rightfully ours to begin with.
Right.
And
Right.
we're two mama bears just trying to help our own children. And that's all we were doing. We're not out there trying to burn down buildings or trying to get our point across and get mad when we're not heard. You know, we'll do it in a loving, kind way. And that's the way that we'll always do it. We'll never backlash on anybody because the reason we did it was freedom of choice.
Yep.
And
Yep.
everybody has a choice to do what they want with their life because I'm not one to say, hey, you need to go get a vaccine to protect me. No, because that
Right.
vaccine could
Right.
hurt them, but
Right.
that's not my place.
And
And
that's
so
kind of, I think that the point is it's freedom of choice, and we're Iowans, we're Americans, we're born with freedoms. We everybody should have the freedom of choice. I mean, the whole my body, my choice thing, that's important. You know, wearing a mask is a medical procedure. I mean, getting a experimental or emergency use authorization shot that's not approved by the FDA
Yeah.
is a medical procedure. I mean, it
We
should
just have
always be
like
an individual's choice.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, Oliver, but we just have 2 more minutes because we're going to
Oh,
be with
okay.
Bards of War soon with Scott Kesterson. But
All
I want to
right.
say in closing that it's shown throughout history. Anytime you rise up and you do something to take a stand, people are going to speak negatively of you. The Lord says,
Yep.
woe to you when all men speak well of you. So
Exactly.
I live for an audience of one, and that's the Lord himself. And so I don't have to please anyone else by the decisions I make or what I do. Not that I don't want to be loving. I do love all people, but I'm going to live for the Lord and his purposes for me. And then I don't need to seek the approval of man, because if I did that, the Lord says, if you fear man more than me, then you can't be my servant. And there's nothing I want more than for him in the end, when I take my last breath, for him to say, well done, good and faithful servant, because that's all I see myself as. I'm just a small part in a beautiful just world where God is moving. And even when there's darkness and we can see the darkness, the light will drive it out. And that's what I'm seeing right now and I'm rejoicing in. And we see it all over the place. So we just need to open our eyes and ask the Lord to open our eyes and open our ears to him and where he's moving and what he's doing.
Beautifully said. And thanks so much. I look forward to further conversations with you guys. I know that there's a lot before us and a lot ahead of us, and we'll be
Yes.
doing it together. So God
Yes,
bless
we're in
you
this
both.
together.
Yeah.
Love you, Oliver.
Yeah, love you
Love you.
too. Enjoy your next interview and good luck tonight too.
thank you, Ann.
Thanks so
All right.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Yep. Thank you. Wow, that was fantastic. Um, that was such a great conversation. I'm gonna put Emily and Kimberly's group in a link down below. You can join them at Freedom Over Fear 2. check out Jeff Shipley's forum tonight. I'll see if I can find a link to that. But we're going to continue with Iowans for Freedom, interviewing and reporting to you guys and giving you information about what's coming up in legislation, what kind of events are coming up, how you can support your representatives, and how you can be a positive change for good in Iowa. So God bless you, and we'll see you next time.